Hello, this is Dr. Nelson with Chapter 3. In the wee hours of Friday morning, I stole Mam's shoes. I had to. They were the only shoes in the flat, other than Jamie's canvas shoes, which were too small even for my bad foot. Mam's shoes were too big, but I stuffed the toes with paper. I wrapped a rag around my bad foot. I tied the laces tight. The shoes felt strange, but I thought they would probably stay on. Jamie looked at me in amazement. "I've got to take them," I whispered, "otherwise people will see my foot." He said, "You're standing, you're walking." My big moment. And now I hardly cared. There was too much ahead of me. Yes, I am. I glanced at Mam, who lay on the bed snoring, her back to us. Proud of me? Not bloody likely. I slid down the stairs on my bottom. At the end of them, Jamie helped me up, and we set out together into the silent early morning streets. One step, I thought. One step at a time. It was interesting to be at ground level. The light was tinged pink, and a faint blue haze seemed to rise off the buildings, so that everything seemed prettier than it did later in the day. A cat streaked around a corner, chasing something, probably a rat. Other than the cat, the street was empty. I held Jamie's hand on my right side for support. In my left, I had a paper bag with food in it for breakfast. Jamie said we were supposed to be at his school at 9 o'clock in the morning, hours ahead. But I'd figure the earlier we got away, the better. I didn't know how long it would take me to get to the school. I didn't want people to stare. The street was bumpy, which I hadn't realized from my window. Walking was harder than in our flat. The shoe helped, but by the time I made it to the end of the lane, my foot hurt so badly I didn't think I could take a single step further. But I did. "Turn here," Jamie whispered. "It's not far." Another step and my bad foot twisted. I fell, gasping. Jamie knelt beside me. "You could crawl," he said, "so nobody's watching." "How much further?" I asked him. "3 blocks, he said. He added, "Blocks is the buildings in between the streets. We've got to cross 3 more streets." I measured the distance with my eyes. 3 streets. Might as well have been 3 miles. 300 miles. "Suppose I'll crawl a bit," I said. But crawling on the street was harder than crawling in our flat. My knees were calloused, of course, but the stones hurt, and the trash and mud weren't pleasant either. After a block, I took Jamie's hand and hauled myself upright. "How come you don't walk when you can?" Jamie asked. "It's new," I said. "I learned it this summer while you were out." He nodded. "I won't tell," he said. "Doesn't matter." Already the world seemed huge to me. If I looked up at the tops of the buildings, I felt dizzy. "We're going to the country. Nobody minds if I walk there." Of course, that was a lie. I didn't know anything about where we were going. I didn't really even know what the word country meant. But Jamie gripped my hand tighter and smiled. The school was a brick building with an empty yard surrounded by a metal fence. We made it inside and I collapsed. We ate bread dipped in sugar. It was good. "Did you take Mom's sugar?" Jamie asked, wide-eyed. I nodded. "All of it," I said, and we laughed out loud. The air was chilly now that we weren't moving, and the ground felt damp. The roar of pain in my ankle subsided into a deep throbbing ache. I looked up at all the unfamiliar buildings, the scrolls and fancy brickwork, the shingles, the window frames, the birds. I didn't notice the woman walking across the yard until Jamie poked us. She smiled at us. "You're here early," she said. "One of the teachers, I suppose." I nodded and gave her a big smile in return. "Our dad dropped us off before he had to go to work," I said. "He said you'd take good care of us." The woman nodded. "And so I will," she said. "Would you like some tea?" When we got up, of course, she noticed my limp. Limp nothing. I was staggering, lucky to have Jamie to catch me. "Ah, you poor thing," she said. "What's wrong?" "I heard it," I said, "early this morning," which was true enough. "Will you let me look at it?" she said. "Oh, no," I said, forcing myself to keep moving. "It's getting better already." After that, it was easy. It was the most impossible thing I'd ever done, but it was also easy. I held on to Jamie and I kept moving forward. The yard filled with children and teachers. The teachers organized us into lines. I wouldn't have been able to walk the half-mile to the train station. I was mostly done in. But suddenly in front of me was a face that I recognized. "That you, Ada?" said Stephen White. He was the oldest of the White children. There were 3 girls between Stephen and Billy. The whole bunch of them had pulled up and were staring at me. They'd never seen me other than through my window. "It's me," I said. Stephen looked surprised. "I didn't think you'd be coming," he said. "I mean, of course, you've got to get out of London, but our ma'am said they had special places for people like you." My ma'am hadn't said anything about special places. I said, "What do you mean, people like me?" Stephen looked at the ground. He was taller than me, older, I figured, but not by much. "You know," he said. I knew. "Cripples," I said. He looked back at my face, startled. "No," he said, "simple, not right in the head. That's what everybody says." He said, "I didn't even know you could talk." I thought of all the time I spent at my window. I said, "I talk to you all the time. I know you wave and jibber jabber, but," he looked pretty uncomfortable now, "we can't ever really hear you down on the street. We can't make out what you're saying. I didn't know you could talk normal. And your ma'am says as how you've got to be kept locked up for your own good." For the first time he looked at my feet. "You're a cripple?" I nodded. "How did you get here?" "Walked," I said. I couldn't let Jamie go alone. "Was it hard?" he asked. I said yes. An odd expression passed over his face, one I didn't understand at all. "Everyone feels sorry for your ma'am," he said. There was nothing I could say to that. Stephen said, "She know you're gone?" I would have lied, but Jamie piped up, "No, she said Ada was going to go get bombed." Stephen nodded. "Don't worry about walking to the station," he said. "I'll give you a ride." I didn't know what he meant, but one of his little sisters smiled up at me. "He gives me rides," she said. I smiled back. She reminded me of Jamie. "Okay then." So Stephen White piggybacked me to the station. The teacher that had given me tea thanked him for helping. We marched in a long line, and the teachers made us sing "There'll Always Be an England." Finally, we got to the station, which was overflowing with more children than I knew existed in the world. "Can you get onto the train all right?" Stephen asked, setting me down. I grabbed Jamie's shoulder. "Of course I can." Stephen nodded. He started to herd Billy and his sisters into a group. Then he turned back to me. "How come she keeps you locked up if you're not simple?" "Because of my foot," I said. He shook his head. "That's crazy," he said. "It's because of whatever I did to make my foot like that." He shook his head again. "Crazy." I stared at him. Crazy? The teacher started yelling then, and we all climbed onto the train. Before the noon church bells rang, the train began to move. We'd escaped. Ma'am, Hitler's bombs, my one-room prison, everything. Crazy or not, I was free. And here ends chapter 3.